You are looking at a machine that could weave 20 different colors at once, while the operator literally walked away to grab a sandwich. If you are wearing a plaid shirt or sitting on a fancy rug right now, you probably owe your entire style to a massive factory in Worcester, Massachusetts. Most people think the Industrial Revolution was just about steam engines and coal, but the real magic happened in the threads of our clothes. For over a century, two rival families fought a bitter war over patents until they joined forces to create the most complex machines on Earth. Today, we are looking at the rise, the secret tech, and the sudden disappearance of the legendary Crompton and Knowles loom works. By the end of this, you will see why these massive iron beasts were actually the world's first mechanical computers. You will also learn how a simple piece of wood flying through the air changed the way every human being on the planet dresses themselves. Imagine waking up in the year 1830 and wanting a new shirt with a nice colourful pattern on it. Back then, a person had to sit at a wooden frame for days, moving their hands back and forth to lace every single thread. It was slow, it was exhausting, and it meant that only the richest people could afford clothes that were not plain and boring. That all started to change because of a man named William Crompton, who moved from England to the United States with a big dream. In 1837, he came up with a patent for the very first fancy power loom that could handle complex patterns using machinery. Before his invention, power looms were basically one-trick ponies that could only make simple, flat, white cloth. Crompton figured out a way to control the warp threads individually, which allowed the machine to weave intricate designs automatically. This was a massive deal because it meant factories could suddenly mass-produce patterned fabrics for the first time in history. But William was not the only genius in town, and his son, George Crompton, eventually took over the family business to make it even better. George was a visionary who realized that the world wanted more than just basic cotton. They wanted woolens, silks, and fancy decorative tapestries. Meanwhile, just down the road, another inventor named Lucius Knowles was working on his own version of the perfect weaving machine. Knowles developed something called the open shed loom, which was a huge technical leap forward for the industry. In an open shed loom, the threads stay separated longer, which reduces the chance of them getting tangled or breaking during the process. This made the machines much faster and much more reliable, meaning a single worker could watch over several looms at the same time. For decades, the Crompton family and the Knowles family were the biggest rivals in the heart of Worcester, Massachusetts. They spent years suing each other over who owned which patent and who invented which specific gear or lever first. It was a classic industrial standoff, with both companies trying to out-engineer the other in a race to control the textile market. Worcester became the Silicon Valley of its time, filled with machine shops, iron foundries, and brilliant engineers looking for work. Eventually, both families realized that they were spending more money on lawyers than they were on building new machines. In 1897, they decided to stop fighting and merged their companies to form the Crompton and Knowles Loom Works. This merger was one of the most important moments in American manufacturing history because it created a true global powerhouse. By pooling their resources and their best patents, they were able to dominate the market for what they called fancy looms. They did not just want to make the cheap stuff. They wanted to make the machines that created the most beautiful fabrics in the world. The company set up a massive manufacturing complex on Grand Street in Worcester that looked like a small city made of red brick. Inside those walls, thousands of workers were pouring molten iron and machining precision parts for thousands of looms every single year. If you walked into a textile mill in the early 1900s, the sound would have been absolutely deafening, like 1,000 hammers hitting at once. The heart of the Crompton and Knowles machine was the multi-shuttle capacity, often referred to as the drop box motion. Think of a shuttle like a little wooden boat that carries a spool of thread back and forth across the loom at high speeds. Most looms only had one shuttle, but a C&K loom could have 4 or even 6 shuttles stacked on top of each other. The machine could automatically pick which color thread it needed and launch that specific shuttle across the fabric in a split second. It was like watching a high-speed robot play a game of catch with itself using different colored balls of yarn. This technology allowed for the creation of ginghams, plaids, and brocades that were previously impossible to make on a machine. Another huge breakthrough was the automatic bobbin changer, which solved a major problem that had plagued weavers for centuries. Originally, when a shuttle ran out of thread, the machine had to stop so a human could manually put in a new spool, or bobbin. Crompton and Knowles engineers developed a way for the loom to sense when the thread was low and eject the empty bobbin. A fresh bobbin would then be slammed into the shuttle while the machine was still running at full speed without missing a single beat. This was revolutionary because it meant the looms could run 24 hours a day with very little human intervention. As the company grew, they began to categorize their machines into specific series that became famous throughout the entire industry. The S-series looms were built specifically for high-speed weaving of delicate materials like silk and the newly invented rayon. On the other hand, the W-series looms were heavy-duty monsters designed to weave thick woolens and worsted fabrics for suits and coats. They even integrated jacquard technology, which used punched cards to tell the machine exactly which threads to lift and lower. These punched cards were basically the ancestors of computer code, telling the loom to create incredibly detailed pictures in the fabric. You could feed a stack of cards into a C&K loom and it would weave a portrait of a person or a complex floral scene perfectly. The economic impact of this company was massive, especially for the New England region where textile mills were the lifeblood of the economy. Crompton and Knowles looms were not just sold in Massachusetts, they were shipped to mills all across the southern United States and the world. As the textile industry moved south to places like North Carolina and South Carolina, C&K followed them to provide the machinery. They had sales offices in Europe and Asia, making the Worcester brand a global symbol of American engineering excellence. But being at the top of the mountain means everyone is trying to knock you off, and the challenges started to pile up. During the World Wars, the company had to stop making looms and pivot their entire factory to support the military effort. They used their precision machinery to make shells, gun parts, and specialized equipment that the soldiers needed on the front lines. After the wars ended, the textile industry began to change rapidly, and the old way of doing things was being threatened. New competitors from Europe and Japan started developing shuttleless looms, which used air or water jets to move the thread. These new machines were much faster and quieter than the heavy iron shuttle looms that Crompton and Knowles were famous for. A shuttleless loom could weave cloth at speeds that made the traditional C&K machines look like they were standing still. The company faced a massive choice: reinvent their entire product line or find a new way to make money. They began a strategy of diversification, buying up smaller companies that made everything from chemicals to packaging machinery. Eventually, they realized that the future was not in the machines themselves, but in the dyes and chemicals used to finish the cloth. In a move that shocked many in the industrial world, the company slowly started to exit the loom manufacturing business altogether. By the middle of the 20th century, the red brick buildings on Grand Street were no longer humming with the sound of weaving. Crompton and Knowles transformed into a specialty chemical company, leaving their mechanical roots behind to focus on the science of color. Today, the Crompton and Knowles name is still around in the corporate world, but the looms are mostly found in museums or private collections. The massive factory in Worcester has been repurposed, but if you look closely at the architecture, you can still see the history. The legacy of the company lives on in the mechanical engineering departments of schools like Worcester Polytechnic Institute. Many of the principles of automation and precision manufacturing that we use today were perfected in those loom shops a century ago. It is amazing to think that the shirt you are wearing is a direct descendant of a patent filed by a man with a dream in 1837. Crompton and Knowles did not just make machines, they made the modern world possible by making quality goods affordable for everyone. They took a craft that was slow and difficult and turned it into a high-speed art form powered by gears and levers. Even though the era of the shuttle loom has passed, the spirit of innovation they brought to the industry will never truly fade away. Next time you see a complex pattern on a piece of fabric, remember the iron giants from Worcester that made it all happen. Their story is a reminder that even the biggest industry leaders have to adapt or be left behind by the march of technology. We often forget how much engineering goes into the simple things we use every single day of our lives. The Crompton and Knowles loom is a perfect example of how human creativity can solve even the most tangled problems. From the first wooden frames to the massive automatic power looms, the journey of weaving is the journey of civilization itself. It is a story of rivalry, genius, and the constant search for a better way to build the things we need.
Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe. It really helps us.